The early morning air in Texas City on April 16, 1947, was still thick with the scent of salt from the nearby Gulf. People were beginning their routines, coffee brewing in kitchens, children preparing for school, dockworkers getting ready for another day at the busy port. No one had any idea that the day would end in devastation, smoke, and the cries of a town brought to its knees. For James Walker, a longshoreman with calloused hands and a proud streak, it was another day at Pier O. He and his buddy, Earl Matthews, had been working the docks for over a decade. James was 45, sturdy and quiet, a father of 3, and the kind of man who never missed a shift. That morning, the Grand Camp, a French cargo ship, had docked to pick up a massive load of ammonium nitrate, a chemical fertilizer. James knew it was dangerous stuff, but he'd loaded plenty of hazardous cargo over the years. This was just another job. By 8 a.m., a light haze of smoke began wafting from the Grand Camp's hold. James smelled it before he saw it. "Something's burning," he muttered, grabbing a fire hose. Earl stood nearby, scanning the cargo deck. "It ain't spreading fast," Earl said, though his brow was furrowed. "Still, this ain't good." Ship officers had already noticed the smoke and were trying to contain it. They had even closed the hatches in an attempt to smother the fire. But that only allowed heat and pressure to build. Within the hour, onlookers gathered, fascinated by the fire but unaware of the lethal potential. In town, Sarah Carter, a young schoolteacher, walked her students back inside after their morning recess. Her classroom windows faced the docks, and she noticed the plume of smoke rising like a dark ribbon in the sky. She whispered a silent prayer, uneasy but not yet alarmed. Back at the docks, the smoke thickened, and hissing sounds emerged from the ship. Firefighters arrived, joining the crew in a battle that was already lost. At 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp exploded with a force so tremendous it registered on seismographs and could be heard as far as Louisiana. The blast flattened buildings, flipped cars, and sent a shockwave of fire and steel through the city. James and Earl were vaporized in an instant. Hundreds of dockworkers, sailors, firefighters, and civilians died where they stood. In the schoolhouse, glass shattered inward like shrapnel. Sarah threw herself over her students. When she came to, her ears rang and blood ran down her face. Desks were overturned, and children cried in confusion. She gathered the uninjured, leading them out into a world turned to ash. Across town, the blast had knocked down power lines and ignited secondary fires. Emergency workers struggled to navigate the debris-strewn roads. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and makeshift triage centers were established in churches and gymnasiums. John Reynolds, a volunteer firefighter, had just ended his overnight shift when he heard the blast. He sprinted toward the smoke, climbing over wreckage and dodging falling debris. The ship's hull had disintegrated, replaced by a smoldering crater. Bodies lay everywhere, and cries for help echoed through the twisted metal and rubble. He found a young boy pinned beneath a steel beam and pulled him free. The child was barely breathing. John cradled him and ran toward the nearest ambulance. Over the next several hours, John rescued dozens, though he lost just as many. At one point, a second ship, the High Flyer, which had also been carrying ammonium nitrate, exploded in the night, worsening the horror. By morning, Texas City was a shell of its former self. The skyline had changed forever, marked now by a massive column of smoke and sorrow. Families searched frantically for loved ones, posting photos and names on bulletin boards erected by volunteers. Sarah stayed at the school, which had become a shelter. She cooked meals with whatever food they could find, comforted children who had lost their parents, and kept hope alive when it seemed nothing could grow from the scorched ground. In the days that followed, rescue operations gave way to recovery efforts. More than 500 people were confirmed dead, though many were never identified. Entire families had been lost. James Walker's wife Helen waited at the port every day for news, though deep down she knew he was gone. Earl's widow wept quietly at the church steps, clutching her husband's work gloves. The city came together like never before. Volunteers arrived from nearby towns. Donations poured in from across the country. President Truman sent federal aid. But the scars would never fully heal. Entire blocks had to be rebuilt. Survivors carried nightmares they could not shake. Months later, a memorial was held at the rebuilt city square. Sarah stood beside her students, some now orphaned, as the mayor read the names of the deceased. John Reynolds, in a clean uniform, received a medal for his bravery, though he never felt like a hero. A plaque was erected near the docks, where the Grand Camp once floated. It read, "To those who perished and those who endured, you are not forgotten." Years passed. Children grew into adults, scars fading on skin but not in memory. Helen Walker eventually remarried but kept James's photo by her bedside. Sarah continued teaching, her hair turning gray, her voice still steady. John retired from firefighting and became a counselor, helping others navigate trauma like his own. The explosion in Texas City was the deadliest industrial accident in American history. Changed laws, protocols, and lives. But more than that, it became a reminder of how fragile a dream can be, and how quickly it can turn to smoke. And yet, from the ashes, the city rebuilt. Families planted gardens where rubble once lay. Laughter returned to playgrounds. New docks rose from the shore. Texas City endured, not unchanged but unbroken.